welcome everyone to Treasure Hunting 101. This is Nathan Schwinke. I'm the owner and operator of Midwest Diggers based out of Lincoln, Nebraska. We sell treasure hunting supplies and metal detecting equipment for avid treasure hunters. Today's little training session will be kind of for the amateur treasure hunter. So for those of you that are experienced and advanced, you may not get a whole lot out of this, but maybe you'll learn a thing or two. Who knows? I'll be going over all kinds of different things today for treasure hunting, and this is probably about a 45-minute to 1 hour session. So we hope you enjoy. All right, we'll get started. All right. First, I'm going to start off with going over some history of treasures in the Nebraska area, only because that's where I'm from, so I thought I'd start with that. Being out in the Midwest here, we don't have a lot of opportunity for big treasures or well-known treasures that have been hidden. All right, so one of the famous gangsters out of the past is Jesse James and his gang of bandits, and they were well known for coming through Nebraska quite often and robbing banks and stashing their loot wherever they could find places to store it while they were on the run. Here's a neat little photo of Jesse James and his gang. All six of them. Jesse James is in the lower right there. And this was taken sometime around 1876 was the estimated time that this photo was taken. There's not a lot of photos of Jesse James and his crew, but this is kind of a neat one. So Jesse James again was notorious for robbing banks, and a lot of the times with them being on the run, they had to find places to hide their loot. One of the thoughts was that in Lincoln, Nebraska, there's a place called Robber's Cave, and that's one of the locations where they thought to hide out while they're on the run from the law. And Robber's Cave today is a location that can be toured. I think it's $10 to get into the cave and to take a tour, so it's fairly cheap and reasonable. If you're in the area, I recommend taking a tour of this place. It's really neat, and a lot of people don't even know it exists. So it's just kind of a neat little place to check out with some history behind it here in the state of Nebraska. Here's just a photo of, I think, the original owner on the left there when they first started the construction and getting it ready for tours. I know right when they opened it up, they had a problem with bats, so the state had to come in and they had to kind of put the project on hold so they could take care of the bats that were living in the cave at that time. All right, another well-known lost treasure is the David Colbert McLean's Lost Fortune. This was a businessman who made his fortune building a bridge over Rock Creek. And back then, when the Oregon Trail passed on his land, travelers had to get across the creek so they could get up into northwest Kearney area, and it just made a shortcut for those people that were making that trail. And he would charge. I don't know how much he charged, but I heard it was like 25 cents to 50 cents to pass with a wagon and horses to get across the creek in his area. This is near Fairbury, Nebraska, for those of you that are familiar with it, and he is said to have buried hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gold coins in iron kettles around Rock Creek Station, which was where he lived. And they're saying that Wild Bill Hickok caught up with Mr. Cobb in the early 1860s and killed him before he could do anything with all the money that he had acquired during that time. Here's a neat little old photograph of Rock Creek Station. This was the area that you could pass with your wagon to get a shortcut on the Oregon Trail. Just a neat little old photo there. All right, here's one. Dobbytown. This is a location that was called the Former's Gambler's Paradise. Dobbytown was near Fort Kearney, Nebraska. For those of you familiar with Kearney, it's about directly smack dab in the middle of Nebraska. And it was a fort that was set up around Civil War time. Really wasn't used, but there was a lot of soldiers that did stay there when they were making their rounds. This was a location that gamblers would stop by to buy alcohol, for women and for entertainment purposes, and it was located right outside Fort Kearny, so there was a lot of soldiers that then that could visit this location as well. And because at the time, if they won any money or had large sums of money that they've acquired, they couldn't typically take their winnings with them. So what they would do, a lot of them would just bury it in known little spots with markers, and then try to come back to it later, and that's what's called a cache. And so the thought is that there's probably lots of areas or caches around Dobbytown that still exist today that can be dug up. All right, treasure at Lodgepole Creek. Lodgepole Creek is near Sidney, Nebraska. In the early 1860s, a group of robbers held up a stagecoach and supposedly got away with around 400 pounds of gold bars. Now that's a lot of gold. That for back then, for transporting and ways to get your gold around, more than times would be held in a stagecoach. But if you held up a stagecoach and got off with the gold, you hopefully had some horses to get that gold around. So supposedly a posse surrounded them and took the gold from them. And during that time, around the Lodgepole Creek area, the legend goes that they never came back for it, and they hid it due to the amount of gold that they acquired. And supposedly they're still stashed away somewhere along the creek banks of the creek near Sidney. So that's kind of a neat little story as well. All right, the Medley fortune is another fortune, Nebraska lost treasure. Medley was a blacksmith who lived near Peru, Nebraska, and it was a supply run. He was on a supply run to Missouri in the middle 1800s, and before he left, he supposedly buried a couple $1,000s in gold coins, which was pretty common back then, especially if you left your residence for a longer period of time, because if someone were to break in or something were to happen while you're gone, your coins were kept in safekeeping until you came back. The problem with this case was Medley never came back from his trip, so supposedly all his fortune was never found and is still out there today to be found, more than likely somewhere near his area where he lives. All right, Buffalo Bill's secret stash. Old Buffalo Bill Cody. He was well known in the area for making a lot of money performing and putting on Wild West shows. And with the money that he had made during that time doing all his shows, supposedly he had buried a lot of it, $17,000 in gold coins, somewhere on the grounds or near Scott Rest Ranch in North Platte, Nebraska. The reports have never been confirmed, but again, these type of treasures exist because no one's ever found them. It's just kind of a fun little mystery regarding any Buffalo Bill fans out there, that he was someone else that at the time, before banks were big, and when you acquired a lot of currency, a lot of gold and silver, you had nowhere to put it, and so a lot of people would bury their fortunes. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to obtain info on where to find treasure and how to go about that. All right, so 3 big places that we use for identifying and locating areas to hunt are the internet, of course. Now is a big thing because everyone has access to it, most people anyway, and it's just easy to do. We'll talk about old plat maps, and then we'll also talk about our historical society. And most states have a historical society that you can visit, so Nebraska is not unique in this scenario, but we'll talk a little bit about that. All right, the internet, simply doing a search, old treasure in Nebraska, wherever you're from, Kansas, California, New Jersey, you can just do a search on the internet and start doing the research. Google is a great place to start for that. And there's a lot of data out there, a lot of information. All right, plat maps. So plat maps are kind of like gold for treasure hunters, and we'll talk a lot about this. So this is a plat map of Lancaster County, which is kind of where I'm from. And the plat map are maps from the 1800s, early 1900s that lay out the area of your counties by location. And this is before anything was really built on these areas of land. And you'll notice when we zoom in a little bit on this plat map, you'll notice how there's a couple of schoolyards, a cemetery, and today these schoolyards are simply cornfields in my area of town. However, using these old plat maps, I can use these maps and then go to these areas and then obviously get permission to hunt them. But today, these are just simply cornfields where no buildings even exist. So back in the 1800s, they were schoolhouses, and that's great places to hunt looking for lost treasure, especially for people that metal detect. Here's just a shot of the Nebraska State Historical Society. It's a really neat place to visit. They have old maps, they got old charts, pretty much anything on the history of your state. Most states have this type of building that you can visit and do the research because there's a lot of great data there that you can get photocopies of and walk out with that information at very minimal cost, 50 cents or $1 based on what they charge for copies. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about types and locations for treasure hunting. This is kind of some big questions that always come up. What's the best places to metal detect and then treasure hunt? Well, we're going to talk about visiting old schools, old parks, old ghost towns, street tearouts, old houses and farms, and old swimming holes. These are the areas we're going to focus on today during the session. All right, old schools. This is kind of one of my favorites to hunt too. Old schools are fun to hunt because you never know what you're going to find. And when you get these old buildings like this that you can tell used to be an old school ground, obviously getting permission again is an important item, but it's a good place to start. And usually the people that own these type of lands usually are pretty lenient with letting you hunt because the buildings aren't in use anymore, and they're just letting them kind of run down. We talked again on those old plat maps. Here's a shot of an old schoolhouse from the 1800s, and today this would be either a field or it would be a new community with new houses and so forth. So if you can find those locations, they're great to use and to go after for treasure hunting. Here's a shot of an old schoolhouse that actually I hunted. They were tearing out the concrete, and so they took about a foot off the top there, as you can see, and we found some good stuff there. I think we found some 1920s coins, mercury dimes, those kind of things, jewelry, that type of stuff. So anytime you can get at these old schoolyards, and especially if they're tearing the ground up, it's a highly recommended place to do. There's just another shot of an old schoolhouse. These are fun. I love doing these schoolhouses when you can get into the history and find something like that still exists, that has some age to it and some history. Here's a shot of an old schoolhouse too that's been abandoned, and you'll notice the ground's been tore up. Those are the best places to go because when they take that 6 to 8 inches off the top, you never know what you're going to find underneath. Old parks are great places to hunt. Even new parks are great to hunt. People visit the parks, they lose stuff, they lose jewelry, they lose their coins, and it makes it great for an opportunity to pick up with metal detectors, obviously, and other treasures that you can find. One thing that I always look for with old parks are the old school ground equipment like this. The little merry-go-round, and you'll notice the old slide in the background. I think those type of objects give you some hints on the age of the parks, and those are kind of nice to do. Here's another shot of an old little merry-go-round, probably the early 60s, maybe late 50s. The equipment in the background there is a little newer, but this looks like a great park to hunt. Anything that's got some history and some age to it. Here's an old slide. To the most people's eye, this park would look dilapidated, and it wouldn't look like it's any fun to do, or to even attend or go to. But from a treasure hunter's perspective, this is a great place to hunt. You got the overgrown trees. It's not taken care of. And the old slide. Back in the day, this was probably an active place with a lot of people visiting. So those are the type of places that make it fun to go explore and to hunt. Here's a shot of a park, and this is in our town here in Lincoln, Nebraska, called Epworth Park. Just an old shot of the building that existed back in the early 1900s. And today this is simply just a field and it's just loaded with trees that doesn't even exist anymore. None of the structures exist. But you look at all the people that attended the events that were held there, and and when you do your research and you do your history review, finding these kind of places are great to do because of the amount of people that attended these sessions back in the day. Here's just another shot of one of the parks that exist here in Lincoln, Nebraska, that no longer is here. But these are postcards just showing the people that existed there, and they'd come there from all over the place to visit these events that they would hold there. Here's another screenshot of the park from the outside looking in. So looking at it today, it's just simply an overgrown forest, but it's great and it's fun to hunt because there's a lot of history there, and good stuff can be found. All right, so another area that's fun to hunt are ghost towns. Now, there's ghost towns in about every single state in the United States. Some are more well known than others. But one of the things that you can do is, go do your research again on the internet and go look at these places and find out where they existed. This here's obviously some structures still exist, which are, it's typically rare for ghost towns, especially from the 1800s. You may be able to find bases yet for the buildings, but typically you're not going to find the structures still standing like this. Here's a shot here that existed. And this is just showing just the one structure here that exists kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So if you can find remnants of areas, typically, they're good to do if you can get permission again by going out and asking someone to treasure hunt their land and to work with them on whatever you find. Again, here's just a kind of a neat little picture of an old ghost town that exists out west. Showing the old post office and the general store. And these are some neat things. If you can get access to, it's definitely highly recommended for especially metal detecting. If you can get access to the properties. Here's an old ghost town that exists, and it's funny because I didn't notice this when I first seen it, but this looks like an old western town. And a lot of the towns back in the Wild West days used to do public executions, and so I don't know if that's what this was, but they'd be out in the middle of the street and they would do that publicly for people that were found guilty of crimes back in the day. But anyway, this would be a great spot to metal detect if you can get access to the property. All right, here I'm just showing, this is the state of Nebraska. There's roughly 13 or so ghost towns that are known to exist, and this kind of just gives the areas of those locations in the state of Nebraska. So you do your research, from wherever you live, you can find out where those exist, and you can go visit those locations. And most of the time with the ghost towns, especially if they're state or local or city-owned property, most of the times you can get access to them with not much effort at all, and do your treasure hunting. So it's good to to know where these locations exist. All right. We're going to talk about one of my favorite places to hunt are street tearouts. These street tearouts are awesome because most of the times when you're able to get to a location where they're ripping out the street or the road, especially in older areas, it's the first time that ground's been touched, sometimes in over 100 years. So every town's got their old part of town and their old streets. Some of them still with brick. Here's a good shot of a sidewalk tear-out. Sidewalk tear-outs are great as well. It's the same reason. A lot of the older neighborhoods, before they even had sidewalks, people just walked along the grass and would drop coins or jewelry. And then at some point in time, they then put in sidewalks. So when the sidewalks get ripped out to get replaced or fixed, it's a great time to get in there with your metal detector and go hunt in those areas that are then ripped open. And a lot of the times with the sidewalk tear-outs, it's a very short time span to get in there. Typically, you're looking only at a few days once they're ripped out because the construction crews are going to be in there replacing the sidewalks fairly quickly with new cement. So you got to get in there fairly quick. Here's a shot of a guy just doing a street tear out and finding some coins, having a good old time with his metal detector and finding some lost treasure here. So talk a little bit about paver bricks. Paver bricks, if you get an opportunity to get on a street where they're ripping out paver bricks, you better do it, and you better take as much time as you can to detect those areas, because that's where you're going to find the good stuff. Typically the paver bricks were put in place in the early 1900s. Even some late 1800s paver bricks still exist. So you're looking at about 100 years of no one getting access to what's under the bricks. I did a street tear out with some buddies about 2 years ago up in David City, Nebraska. The downtown was ripping out their main streets, and we were up there. We hunted that probably for a good 5 months because it was a long project. And these are all the paver bricks that came out of those streets. Here's just a photo of me, and this is their city dump where they dump all the paver bricks from the project. And those paver bricks are big and heavy. If anyone's ever held one, they're amazing quality back then, and what they used for roads. All right, so we talk a little bit about swimming holes. Swimming holes are great places to find treasure with your metal detector. Places where people gathered and women lost jewelry or the kids lost their coins. It's just a great place to find that kind of stuff. Now, one of the hard things to do is to find the swimming holes. Today's age, there's not a whole lot of swimming holes that exist. But if you do your research again, you may be able to find locations that provided that type of a fun event for the family. And it doesn't even have to be new. Lakes are great places to go. People gather, and people lose things in the water. I mean, it's something that's so common. That's why a lot of people like to water detect, because of that reason. And if you go in there after a summer vacation, or go there after the 4th of July where there is a lot of people at the place, your odds of finding something are really pretty good. All right, we'll talk about old farmhouses. Farmhouses, especially out here in the Midwest, are pretty common. It's not uncommon to be able to go out and to see a farmhouse like this. When you go out into the country and you're dealing with thousands of acres of land, you come across these old farmhouses. And again, make sure you get permission before you go hunting on someone's property. But typically, the farmers are usually pretty good about giving you access because no one lives there anyway. And just not really doing any damage to the land. Just cover your holes after you dig your plugs. But these are great places to do because, again, you go back to the early 1900s into the 1800s, and if you spend enough time there, you're going to find old coins, maybe some old jewelry, and if you get lucky, maybe a stash of old silver or gold coins, depending on where you're at. Again, remember that before people trusted banks, that's what people did with their money. They buried it in containers all over their property. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about underwater detecting. Some metal detectors are waterproof, some are, some aren't. Most metal detectors, the coil itself can be submerged, but there's only a few where the whole unit can be submerged underwater, like the AT Pro is a fully submergible water detector up to like 10 feet. So be sure you know your equipment before you start using them underwater, because depending on what you have, it may or may not be waterproof, depending on what model you have. So please review that before you take it out to the water. I do water detect. It's not my favorite because I like more hunting on land, and our lakes around Nebraska are really nasty anyway. So it's you can't see anything when you get underwater. But I have done it a little bit, and never really been too successful. But if you get somewhere down like by Florida or somewhere on the coast where the water's clear, I'm sure it's a lot more fun than it is hunting underwater like here in Nebraska. This is just a photo of someone finding a ring, water hunting. Obviously, you can see the water is very clear, so it makes it a lot more pleasant when you're doing your treasure hunting underwater there. It's just a screenshot of someone out there on the beach on the ocean doing some detecting here in the waves. Just kind of a neat little picture of someone doing some treasure hunting there. This is more like hunting in Nebraska here. You got the nasty old rivers and creeks, and even the lakes here are this murky, actually even murkier. But so this is kind of the hunting that I'll do. You know, I'll usually go up to about my waist and go to the beaches and treasure hunt and metal detect as well. Maybe after busy holiday weekends and so forth. So you can find some good stuff. And I know some of those guys, you know, on the East Coast, you know, especially the areas around the Civil War, battlefields, you get into some rivers where you can pull some real great stuff out of those creeks. And again, so, you know, Nebraska here, you know, there's not a whole lot of history, but you can still find some good stuff. Here's just a shot of someone here that did some water hunting and had a hell of a day. He looks like he's in the Garrett the LS there. Um, but you know, and I'm sure this wasn't all found in one day. Probably found on a trip that this individual took. A lot of folks will take trips for, you know, 2 weeks, and they'll go to resort areas and they'll detect and bring their metal detector and come away with a nice cache of rings. Another shot here, someone doing some underwater detecting and some of the goods that they found. So it looks like they did pretty good on their haul as well. All right, we'll talk a little bit about gold panning. You know, gold can be identified and located in creeks and rivers. Gold panning back in the day, you know, out west was a lot of folks were going after the gold. You know, the gold rush out in California. That's how a lot of people made their living back then, and it was a manual process of going to creeks, you know, and looking for gold with your gold pan. And today, you know, a lot of people still do this today. You got to be in the right area, obviously, to do this kind of stuff. But if you can get out west and you can get up into the mountains, maybe in Colorado, get into some of the creeks, or out in California, maybe you can find some gold. You know, like here in Nebraska, there isn't much opportunity to go gold panning, although out in western Nebraska, there is a couple creeks where you can find some really fine gold sand, but it takes quite a bit to make it worth your while, because you're not going to find any nuggets like this here. So gold panning is, depending on where you live, you know, is kind of a fun little way to treasure hunt, and you don't need a metal detector to do it. All you need is a little gold pan. All right, we're going to talk about another little fun way to hunt. This doesn't require any equipment, no metal detectors, no pinpointers, you know, no shovels, no, you don't need anything to do this. Surface fine hunting. This was something I kind of got into after I started treasure hunting and using metal detectors, because I started noticing things that people would leave behind. And one of the first places that we look is just on the ground. You know, when you're going somewhere, you're going to a mall, you're going to a store, parking lots are notorious for people dropping stuff. And one of my favorite things to do after the winter or during the winter is when there's piles of snow that are pushed up into the middle of parking lots in all these locations, and mainly like high schools, shopping malls, any locations where there's a lot of people, a lot of activity, especially during the winter, like when people take off their gloves, their jewelry pops off, it falls on the ground, and then when the trucks come through and push all the snow into this pile, well, that's where everything goes. So when the snow starts to melt, it looks like a nasty, crappy pile of crap out there, but in fact, there's a lot of treasures in these piles of snow. And a lot of people will see that and it won't even register to them that there's an opportunity here to go find something of value, like jewelry, wallets, cash. I mean, I've found anything you could think of in these piles of snow, and of great value as well. Again, this is just another picture of snow as it's melting and all the stuff that was pushed into the center. Now, obviously, there's a lot of trash, but you know, it's all in a local centralized area, so it doesn't take you that long to go through, especially once that snow starts melting. And I'll tell you, if there's gold rings, that stuff sticks out like a sore thumb because that shiny, bright metal will stick out of that dark, dirty snow, and you hit a treasure just right there by looking at that pile of snow. So, surface find hunting is a great way to find treasure. Tot lots. This is another area to find surface find hunts. Now, obviously, a detector helps here, but I've gone and done a ton of tot lots where I found jewelry, coins just laying on the top of the sand. You know, a lot of people will take their babies and their children here, and a lot of the adults, mainly the females, will, you know, they'll be pushing their kids around, and their jewelry will fall off during that process. And just tot lots are well known for lost jewelry because of that reason. It's an active area where you're swinging around and playing with your children, and you lose stuff, and that's where you're going to lose it. So another shot of a tot lot here. And again, depending on what type of ground there is, you know, using a detector will help, but a lot of the stuff just lays right on the top. Here's a shot of some surface find hunts, of items that were found, surface find hunting. So, you know, the stuff is out there, and it can be found. But again, you know, just please note that wherever there's a lot of people, and a lot of people that gathering for like a weekend, you know, like in this area here where outdoor concerts are a great place for surface find hunting. Get in there the next morning after everyone's gone, and you're more than likely going to find some treasure there. Now, again, like if you find a wallet and it's got identification in it, do the right thing and get it back to the owner. Same thing with like cell phones and that kind of stuff. But you know, if someone's losing and dropping jewelry or coins or even cash, you know, I guess you can try to do your best to get a ring back to somebody if you can. Post something in the local Craigslist posting or something. But you know, most of the time that stuff's not claimed because people either they didn't even know they lost it or they don't know where they lost it. So that happens a lot. Again, here's just a shot of, you see all these people out here, everyone's laying on the ground. Chances are someone's going to lose something at these outdoor events. They're great places to look for treasure. All right, surface find hunting, arrowhead hunting, that kind of falls into that category. You know, I recently kind of got into arrowhead hunting because I love the history of the Native Americans, and I think it's just amazing on how you can go out, and if you got the right area, you can find a arrowhead, you know, from back when the Native Americans were still, you know, running the land, and out there taking care of them and their families and hunting, you know, wild game and just living. And if you get to the right areas, you know, you can find, you know, these kind of artifacts. A lot of these type of artifacts will exist on private property again, so you're going to need to get permission. But arrowhead hunting, obviously, metal detectors cannot pick up these objects because they're made of stone. So you know, your best bet is to kind of go after a rain or after a drizzle or after it snows and it's melting, because that's kind of when they stick out of the ground. And you know, you just never know what you're going to find. You know, here's a shot of an arrowhead. It looks just like the rocks around it, and if you're not paying attention, you'd walk right over that, not even knowing that you just passed an arrowhead. So, you know, where do you go arrowhead hunting? Well, if you can get to locations that you know there was activity, typically along creek beds, or along areas where you know there was active people living, you know, back then. It's typically good places because usually they wanted close access to water. So again, this is just a shot looking for arrowheads. You know, every year after the rains, the embankments kind of erode away, so that cuts out more of the area for opportunity to find something. So you know, you just kind of got to do your research and again, find and get access and permission to hunt on that land. Here's just a collection of arrowheads that someone had put together over the years, and it's a nice collection. Again, I don't know much about the arrowhead types, but again, it's just neat how you can find these as a surface find and not even need any equipment to do so. All right, bottle hunting. Bottle hunting is something I haven't done a lot of either, but I do watch a lot of YouTube videos on it. It looks fun. Bottle hunting is kind of the sport of finding old privies, which were old dump sites for old houses back in the 1800s, and and the trash that was thrown into the privies. And today, some of those bottles are valuable and worth some money. Um, these are some bottles that I have found out metal detecting, and I just come across them. I get lucky every once in a while, and something will pop out of the ground as I'm hunting for coins, and every once in a while I'll get lucky. This is a collection. This is not my collection, but again, these were found in a privy, old bottles, and again, a lot of these have value. If someone's collecting them. Someone's willing to pay a pretty hefty sum for the unique bottle if you have it. Here are some bottles just came out of a bottle dump site, privy site. They're all dirty here, and then when you clean them all up, they look really nice, and some of them have value, great value to them. So again, this is just another example of surface finds on what you can find without needing equipment, without needing to spend a lot of money and high-tech equipment to find treasure. Treasure exists out there. You just got to do your research and find those locations. All right, surface find hunting. Now, to the naked eye, this looks like just an old tin can that's sitting on the ground that most people, 9 out of 10, probably wouldn't pay any attention to or even pull it up. But in reality, this was a large find. This was the California find. I think a lot of people are familiar with it. One of the largest finds of caches in our era. I think it was roughly estimated at around $10 million in gold coins that was found on a path walkway out in California. A couple were taking a walk and found these canisters full of 10, 20, $50 gold coins from 1800s. And I don't know a lot on the story, but I do know they got to keep them. And I think the thought process was more than likely it was a bank that probably got robbed in the middle 1800s, and someone stashed the coins, in a hole somewhere on a property and never came back for them. So again, this is another example of when we talk about old farmsteads or old homesteads burying their coins. It's another example of what you can find out there if you're lucky and you got the right equipment. Again, this was a surface find, but they didn't need any equipment to find it. But think about all of the stashes that exist that your metal detector can find if you get access to the right spot. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about metal detecting and treasure hunting equipment. Now, again, a lot of you that are new to treasure hunting, this will be some useful information, but a lot of you advanced folks, obviously already know about most of this, so I'll kind of run through this kind of quickly. Metal detectors are great tools to find metal objects under the ground. A lot of these metal detectors range anywhere from $150 up to $1,500, and we Midwest Diggers, we sell pretty much every brand and every type of equipment, for the starter, beginner, all the way to the advanced user. This is just an example here of a Garrett Ace 150, I think, or maybe 150. And these metal detectors can detect and hunt. You can detect a coin up to about a foot deep, a 50-cent piece or a quarter. So that's about the depth you get with these. Now, obviously, larger objects you're going to be able to detect a little deeper. Here's the new Garrett Apex. This is just a new metal detector that just came out. Pretty nice little unit. And again, this is kind of a midline detector, for someone that maybe has been detecting for a little bit, looking for something new. It's got the wireless headset, and it's a nice waterproof machine. Here's the AT Pro, so another step up. This is what I like using. It's a great machine. It's really durable, sturdy machine. It could be submerged up to 10 feet deep in water. It's a land machine. It's a real durable machine. But again, as you get into metal detecting and you start using equipment, you'll find out what best suits your needs. Here's a White's machine that detects large objects underground. It's a form of metal detector. So if someone's looking for something large at depths of 10, 15 feet, this is the type of machine that you'd want to use. So the equipment does exist out there if you're looking for something that is deeper than the typical metal detector will find. Pinpointers are nice. These are what are called pinpointers. Pinpointers help you speed up the recovery process when you're metal detecting. It's interesting. A lot of people that begin and start out metal detecting typically don't buy a pinpointer because it's fairly expensive. The Garrett on the left there, I think runs about $110. The little Bullseye 2 on the right's about $50 or $60. But we also sell pinpointers that are even more than that, up to about $170. So a lot of people don't spend the money when they first start metal detecting, and then later on they'll typically get a pinpointer and find that they should have bought one when they first started because they couldn't believe that they've been missing out on using a pinpointer all this time. But a pinpointer simply helps you when you dig a big plug and you pull it out of the ground. And if you have that big coil, it's very hard to locate your little coin in that big plug you dug. So the pinpointer will help you identify and pinpoint that location a lot quicker. And if you're out there metal detecting for an 8-10 hour day, you want a pinpointer because you're going to find 10 times the amount of stuff without having one, because the recovery time just speeds up. It's a lot quicker and helps you get through that process. So here we just got shovels. These are some sand shovels. These are good on beaches. If you're out there detecting, these help speed up the recovery process as well. So it's another thing that you want to be on the lookout for if you're going to be doing water detecting mainly or beach detecting. These shovels help you speed up that process. You find your target, you scoop it up, and you're done. All right, digging tools are very important. This is another thing with beginners typically that get into this. Typically won't spend the money on good digging equipment. These are just some tools that we sell they're fairly expensive, but I'll tell you, you buy one of these, you'll never have to buy another digging tool again. The item in the middle is the Lesche digging tool. They run about $50, but it's the only one you'll ever have to buy. I know a lot of people will go to Home Depot or to their local hardware store and buy a garden tool for $15 or $20 and find out that it only lasts you a couple months once you start actively metal detecting. So again, your digging tools are very important. And again, this is an item that you want to have a good quality tool when you get serious about treasure hunting. All right, so what do you do with your finds? This is a big question for a lot of metal detectors and a lot of treasure hunters out there. And I think this is something that it's tough for a lot of us that do this hobby. The cleanup process. So the big question is, do you clean your coins or not? Well, here's an answer from me. Typically, when I hunt and I find my coins, I will bring them home. And if I have key dates, and a key date coin means it's a valuable coin. If I have a valuable key date coin, I will not clean it, but I will clean everything else. Meaning, if it's not a key date coin and there's not much value to it on top of the silver content or the gold content and whatever object you have, go ahead and clean it up and make it presentable, and so you can show people your finds. But if you have a key date coin or a valuable coin, don't really clean it with any material, just soap and water, just so you don't decrease the value by damaging the coin, right? So this is just an example, someone using a toothpick, and a magnifying glass to clean their coins. Here's someone here that's using a toothbrush. That's pretty safe. With soap and water and a toothbrush really won't do a lot of damage to a coin. Again, this is more preference, so everyone's got their own preference on how they clean their coins. I'm not going to say there's a right or wrong way to do it. Again, this is up to the person and the collector and the person that found that object. A lot of people use baking soda and vinegar and salt to clean their coins. I've done this too with some coins. It does a pretty good job, especially with pennies or nickels. Tend to work well. But again, if there's any value to the coin, I typically won't use these kind of materials on it, just to save any value in that coin that may exist. a shot of somebody that cleaned their coin up that they found. Now, obviously, if a collector or a coin shop were to purchase this coin, they more than likely would not give you any more than the content of the silver in the coin, or maybe just give you something spot over good value, because whatever was used to clean it probably did more damage than it did if you would have left it over here on the left for the before pick. If you would have left it as is on the left, you might be able to get a little bit more out of it if you sold it to like a coin dealer than after you clean it on the right. I know it seems odd, but typically that's just kind of how it works. All right, and then the all fail safe tumbler. I do have a tumbler. I do clean coins in my tumbler. It's for coins that I don't care about, meaning I'm not trying to sell, but I want to present them and I want them to look good. I will use a tumbler. And a tumbler, you can get a tumbler for $60, $70. I got one that looks similar to this, and you tumble it with some rocks, and that whatever you throw in there will come out looking really nice and shiny. I do a lot of this with Indian head pennies that don't have any value. My Indian head pennies that are hard to read, that are hard to clean up. I will tumble them so they come out looking really nice. But again, there's not going to be much value once you do that to the coin because you're going to damage the coin. So again, if you're worrying about selling it, or if there's value to the coin, I highly recommend not doing the tumbling. Again, this is just for you if you want to see what coin you got. A lot of the times, if I dig coins, and sometimes I can't even get dates off of them or a year, I'll tumble them, and that will help me with that process. But the coin's already far gone anyway, so it's okay. All right, we'll talk about a little bit about displaying. A lot of people like to display their finds, and I do as well. I mean, that's why we do this. We want to find treasure. We wanted to show it to people and show what we found. Displaying your finds is a fun little way of showing everyone what you got. And there's all kinds of different ways to display. You got little display cases. There's all kinds of different display cases out there. And you can get a lot of this stuff off by Amazon. We sell some display cases as well, but again, displaying your items is just being proud of what you found, and being able to show people what you got. These little display cases here are really nice. They're each individual little pockets to put one little piece in, and these are kind of nice for show and tell. So if you're taking these to like show a class or show your buddies, this is a great way to display your finds. And then you get serious like this person did, and they're showing off their whole collection, which is really neat as well. So that's just kind of a neat little way to show your finds. And then the big question is, and I get this all the time, is what do you do with your finds? Some people do this to try to make money. Most of us don't. I would say probably 95% of our people in the hobby out there that metal detect and treasure hunt don't do it for the money, because you're not going to make any money doing it. And if you do, you're going to be very poor. I mean, if that's what your full-time job is. I mean, we all know that. But if you are doing it to sell your artifacts, if you happen to run into tough times or need to sell something for whatever reason, that's the benefit of this. A lot of the times the stuff that we find can be sold, depending on what you got. Kind of determines what you're going to get out of it for value, for money. But again, this is the ultimate question in the end: is what are you going to do with everything you found? And like for me, I'll probably give everything to my kid, and then he'll probably sell everything, and who knows what he'll end up doing with it. Or hopefully he'll continue the hobby and create and build on the collection I gave him. But again, everyone's different and everyone has their own path, so this is a big question that you'll come into at some point with this hobby. All right, just wanted to go over just a few of my little treasure finds here. Here's a seated dime I found. This was just out in an old park, 1875 seated. I think that's what it was on that. This was a quick little hunt that I did in an old schoolhouse site. Like I found a silver quarter and then a couple pieces of silver jewelry. So that was kind of a fun little day. That's a pretty good haul there for just a couple hours, at an old schoolyard. So again, those old schoolyards are good. This was a junior high, I think, so it was a good location to find the jewelry. You know, grade school kids probably won't have the jewelry. Junior high, high school, yeah. So if you can get an old schoolyard from those eras, it's good to do. This is just an old shot at just some old coins. Another seated dime I found that day. So something kind of fun there. I think this was some finds I did on an old military base. Old mercury dime, old button off a uniform, and an old bullet there. This was some finds here from an old Indian site that they did some trading with the Spanish. A little Indian artifact in the bottom right there, an old flat button on the left. You know, this is probably late 1700s, early 1800s maybe, and then an Indian, and then an old metal arrowhead that I had snapped accidentally when I pulled it out of the ground, but still a neat find. Old cap from an old Ford, probably Model T. Those suckers ring like silver dollars when you find these suckers when they're under the ground, because they're just about the size of a silver dollar, and just the object really bangs those coils when you find these. Rings, of course, jewelry. You know, gotta love finding jewelry. It's an old shot there of a ring and a 49 quarter I found. Diamond ring that was found in an old park. Um, these are some surface finds that I found at an old Indian site in a farmer's field. There's some pottery fragments up in the upper right, and then flintstone here on the left. Um, and that stuff's pretty neat, especially when you get it cleaned up. This was an old item I found in an old Boy Scout camp. I don't know what it is. It's about 8 inches tall, so it's a fairly larger object, but that's a Boy Scout symbol. And the Boy Scout camp was from the 1940s, so I wonder, it probably came off a piece of their equipment or something, but it's kind of a neat little find. Here's just an old 1914 dime and another piece of jewelry that was found. This was a site that we hunted and found two watches like 3 or 4 inches apart from each other. Probably 1950s, 1960s. Just really weird to find two watches right next to each other, you know, under the ground. I mean, just kind of an odd find, but that was kind of neat. Let's see here. This was found, I think, at an old battlefield that I did. This was a drop found. Oh, it was probably 3 or 4 inches deep. This was a site that, or I think it was 1,000 Indians against 300 military folks from the. This was about 1862 is when that battle was fought. That was a fun hunt. I was there for about 2 days. Found a lot of stuff. And this is my dad, Bruce the Digger there. That's his first silver dollar. So he got lucky. It was a few years back, found that, and he was fortunate to knock that off his bucket list. That's a tough one to find. I've yet to find a silver dollar, but you do it long enough, and the chances are pretty good that you'll get one. So 1900. So he got lucky with that. That was a fun day. All right, and then just here's some jewelry. This is a brooch I found up top, um, and over on the right, a cuff link. And this was from a site from the late 1800s. So it's kind of a neat find there. Finding something with some history behind it there is kind of fun. This was a World War II medal I found. The one on the left is the one I found. The one on the right is what it looks like. Obviously, if it doesn't come from under the ground, but there was nothing on the back, so I was going to try to return it to the family members, but I couldn't pull anything off the back of it. There was some engraving, but it was too far gone, unfortunately, to try to return this. But a neat old find there. All right, well, that concludes Treasure Hunting 101 for today, everybody. I hope everyone had a good time, and I hope someone learned something. The reason I'm doing this is just to teach someone one thing, and I feel it was worth it. So it's a great time with all this COVID stuff going on to get out there and do some treasure hunting. It's a great solo sport or to get a buddy, go out there and find some treasure and do the research, and more than lucky, you can find something, and have a great time doing it. All right, well, you guys have a great one, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care, everybody.